All right, amazing then. So let's continue with the judge introductions in the way in which you appear on the draw, please.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Gyimah. I'll be a panelist at this round. Congratulations to all the teams that made it this far, and good luck.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joanna Mensah. All the best to our teams.
Please, John, are you on the call?
Hi, yes, I'm on the call. Hi everyone. Good luck in the finals.
Hi everyone, my name is Sino. I'll be one of your panelists for this final. Congratulations on making it this far, and good luck.
Hi everyone, Susanna here. Congratulations for making it this far and all the best to everyone.
Hi everyone, my name is Irene. I'm panelist for this round. Good luck for making it this far. Good luck to the ones that will make it. Thank you.
All right. Amazing. Thank you, everyone. So one of the opening teams was missing. I'll just confirm both. Ochi, are you here?
Yeah, we're here now. Thank you.
All right. Oh, you are here also? Opening opposition, are you on the call?
Yeah, we are here.
All right, amazing. Then we can start the debate round. So standard BP rules shall apply. 7 minutes speaking time, first and last are protected. Is there any panelist who is willing to put timestamps on the panel, on the chat, sorry? Emmanuella, can you help us with the timestamps?
Yeah, sure.
All right, thank you so much. All right, with that, we can now have the Prime Minister of the debate. Yeah.
All right, judges, can I confirm I'm audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, beautiful. So for POI, I'm going to be prioritizing closing opposition. And please, the moment my framing is over, closing up, kindly ask the POI. It's very, very important you do so. Otherwise, in the absence of closing up POI, opening up, you are free to shoot your POI. Dedication, perhaps just dedicating this to my partner, Chidima, and every other person who loves debating, because I do love debating. It is very moral for anyone to argue the necessity for why technological use is something that has enhanced human experience in vast majority of instances. Number one, because the natural order of human creation is that humans try to conceptualize ideas based on the feelings of problems he finds in his society. And he asks a simple question: how do I make my experiences and my reality better? I think this is the reason why humans move from gathering woods into using those specific woods to create structure, art, and artifacts in order to enhance its experiences in vast majority of instances. The beauty of this thing is simply called civilization, and the evolution to which it exists in human experiences is directly technological in nature. So we are fine with a world where humans could most likely use technology to solve its common problems. But the simple question is that all that there is to human? From opening government, we said no, for two specific reasons. Number one, we think independent of the discovery of technological tools, which could have the ability to help humans to deal with its complexities, within human exists the ability and also the quality to be able to deal with those specific issues, even with even with all of the harms most likely being exacerbated. Why? Because it is part of the nature of humans to evolve. And it's also part of the nature of human to always find organic solutions to its common problem. That is the reason why a lot of us are crying against people who are relying on AI to do simple things for them, such as even creating arguments or probably reading for exams and all that. Because we think that human brains and humans, arguments, have the capacity to be able to do all these things. But notice, it most likely becomes quite bad when it moves from individual utilization into a societal utilization. I think this is the major board that this particular debate ought to be engaged in. There are just two principal arguments on our side of the aisle from opening government. The first is, why do we think it is principally justified for us to allow this particular sea to break? The first is because of the narrative of intergenerational justice, which the previous generation has naturally normalized, thereby eroding that specific agency for every other futuristic generation to make independent decisions that solve their own peculiar problem. Notice that before the Ankobra people began to use this particular sea to deal with their particular problem, it was first of all conceptualized by some individual who felt this is all that there is into dealing with problems such as emotions and all that. And from my framing, we don't have a problem with it. But in a world where it becomes a standard for every other society, it means there is a large majority of incapacitation of innate human ability to still specifically deal with that particular emotion. That is why some of us are angry when people rely on AI to generate simple arguments, not because like OGs, like the likes of Keku and Diaf and every other legends that have made a lot of marks in debates, got to that particular height by using technology. It's simply because they tax their brain. They tax everything that is within them in order to solve those particular problems inherently. It becomes bad when those sort of like agencies within society set up a particular narrative to say, this is the order of the day. We think right now, if the river has to break, it is a justifiable cause, one, because it directly like liberates them from those historical suppression of human ability to deal with those particular problems, but also two, it serves as an antecedent for future generations to no longer have to rely on those specific mechanisms that have not necessarily improving any sort of like solvency, but what it only does is that it differs, it never solves the ability for those particular emotional flux to permanently be dealt with. I think my second argument will show you why we think that capacity exists on our side of the house. But before I go forward, any PR from closing up? CO.
Yeah, so my question is just on the technology. We get it, tech is good. So I want to understand how this integrates with opening a river or not.
No. The way it integrates with opening the river is that that's my first argument. It's a norm. You have relied on it so long. And that reliance is not just about it being escapism. It's about it being a standard for every other generation to inherit. If this particular technology itself has to fall right now, if it has to break right now, we think it's nice because at least it means everybody has to fall back to status quo in a world where you don't even have to rely. What individuals are independently able to find solutions to their emotional imbalances or their emotional problems. You have the capacity to do that, but you have not necessarily been prioritizing it because you assume that this technology will always be there. I mean, a lot of people that are supposed to do that are dead now, so it's much more of like eye-opening on our side of the house. The second principal argument here is the idea of transformation, which is necessary. Why? Because here, what you have been having so far as closure and solvency is just a quasi-relief system. Why? Because it brings no specific independent and permanent solution. Why? Because the long time you have to most likely rely even on things like trying to hold the bank, which is their comparative they need to defend. OO and CO need to defend holding the bank. The factor that you have to also most likely hold the bank means that you need to use every other resources. You need to use every other internal human thinking, creative thinking into just maintaining the gate. Notice that is the reason why we think it is bad for things like wastage of resources on things that don't work anymore, but more importantly, when the safeguarding of those particular things were not emanating from the original human concept of creation. The original concept of human creation is that when it comes to the human crisis, everybody learns to save themselves. But right now, you're not even wanting to think of saving yourself because all you're trying to protect are those intergenerational handed down principles that have not necessarily given you any sort of solvency. The impact on our side of the house are twofold. The first, that most likely, which is the best case scenario, you survive outside the sea. It means you're able to have a realization that all your life have most likely been lived on lies. But two, that it directly leads to the extermination of this particular society. It means the next generation will have to learn from this particular shortfall of these previous individuals. It means on both best case scenario and worst case scenario on our side of the house, it is something that is good. I think the last principle justification here is that if evolution is something that is consistent with human capacity and human nature, I think it is something that most likely has to be sustained, not because we can't use technology, but it relies as a standard for human solving and problem solvency in itself is outdated. It is time for humans to take their life back into their hands. On this particular premise, we're proud to propose.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for that fine speech. We'll now invite the leader of opposition here.
Hi everyone, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
All right, great. I don't know if Archimedes is on the call, but this speech is dedicated to Archimedes. I hope I make you proud one more time. Collins, thank you very much for being in the finals with me as well. And then I'm going to start in 3, 2. Okay, well, pronouns are they, them, as usual. And POIs in chat. If I don't take you, Collins will really take you to give a wonderful conversation. So if this is fine and my audibility is fine, I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. This debate must operate within a framework that analyzes what a community is rationally permitted to do when every option contains risk. I think the people of Ankobra face a decision that concerns the persistence of their collective identity. The correct framing is not whether emotional repression is harmful or whether fear is uncomfortable. The correct framing is that a community ought to choose when faced with a trade-off between a world that may deteriorate slowly yet retain some possibility of recovery and a world that guarantees the collapse of every stabilizing structure at once. The central fact here is that releasing the sea produces a single terminal event, while maintaining the seal keeps the domain of possible futures happening. Notice that a community must judge its choices using the principle of existential priority. Within this principle states that any solution that forecloses all future agency must be rejected in favor of one that preserves agency, even if the latter is uncertain and costly. Within the guarantee of future choice has infinite marginal value compared to the guarantee of irreversible collapse that comes from the chaos of the overwhelming emotions that are released within this time. Why do we think there's a propensity for chaos? Because most times, most people do not act irrationally because they are able to control the extent of emotion they have. When there's an overwhelming emotion, you most times erode their subconscious, which creates massive chaos, which then destabilizes the state. But closing government can come and say, well, even if it creates chaos, which will probably lead to death and all those other stuff, death in of itself is a very good moral end that must be defended. I'm going to frame all those things within the debate and show you why comparatively we win. Therefore, the debate must be framed around 3 philosophical anchors. First, the continuity of the political subject. Since the people of Ankobra cease to be a collective moral agent the moment they lose control of their internal emotional life. But secondly, the irreversibility of certain decisions, since an irreversible error must be avoided whenever any reversible alternatives exist. And thirdly, the actor's interest in principle, because the motion demands a decision strictly from the standpoint of the community itself rather than from abstract moral ideals. Under this framing, the comparative becomes clear. Why? Because option 1 eliminates the people's agency, eliminates their identity, and eliminates their future. Option 2 preserves all these 3, even if that preservation is fragile within the debate. First of all, and this is the first case I'm running within the debate, why there is a duty to preserve status quo and the last straw that happens. And before that, let me do a little meta on the OG case. OG says, well, people are not finding other alternatives because they think this is the only alternative that exists. 3 responses structurally. Because 1, InfoSlide tells you that most of these engineers now have tried ways of fixing and doing things better, but they have failed. It shows that structurally, capacity does not exist in terms of creating efficiency to solve the problem massively. But secondly, there is already an urgency which is supposed to compel them to look for different things, because they say that this thing is rusting. So they have that conception that this thing is breaking. So they need to find other alternatives. You need to prove that on your side of the house. These people are so dumb that they are not doing any single thing within the debate, even though maxims exist. But lastly, let's even buy their logic and say it's true. Notice that you cannot fix what is completely broken, because you cannot support the existing solution when you haven't found any other way to solve the issue. Because what you do on your side is you let the emotion cause harm, and you claim that that harm will let a lot of people now research, which you don't even prove that there's a propensity that that research is going to yield any benefit. But even if it yield benefit, it takes a longer period of time. People lose their agency. People are subjugated to massive structural harms, which you do not do so. But what makes this even worse is that because they say one generation cannot decide for the other, it means every generation that comes disrupts status quo, creates collateral harm, and creates their own system, which they don't even prove that it's efficient. On the scale of harm that exists on opening government, they lose comparatively. This is not an opportunity cost any sensible person who wants to win within this debate. But firstly, on my case, why is this particularly important in preserving the last role? Notice that when a community faces a decision whose consequence is the permanent destruction of all future value, ordinary cost-benefit reasoning breaks down this. Why is this particularly important? Because the ethics of extinction are not like the ethics of ordinary harms, because extinction of itself eliminates the possibility of any further goods, rights, responsibilities, or repair. We think a rational actor who cares about their own welfare over time treats extinction risk as lexically prior within that instances. If a choice carries a non-zero probability of destroying the entire moral and practical framework or the future of the collectivity, then the duty is to avoid that choice whenever any credible alternative presents even the slightest future of possibility of life that exists. Why do we think this is important? Because this is grounded in the idea of like three structural things. A, that continuity in of itself has unique moral value because it secures the conditions for any other good to exist. But secondly, that irreversibility magnifies the moral weight that exists within the debate, such that an action that destroys future agency forecloses every subsequent corrective measure. So the moral cost must be treated as infinite relative to the reversibility of harm that exists. But thirdly, notice that custodianship across generations imposes a forward-looking obligation. So the living are trustees for descendants, and our trustees, and most of these trustees are morally required to avoid actions that make trusteeship impossible. Why do we think all these things are structurally very, very important? Because it shows you that even if these guys claim that you get chaos, and that chaos might lead to two possible things. I show why, even if they get like benefits on their side in terms of structural solutions, another generation come and disrupt it and all this stuff per their own framing. But secondly, even if they justify that that structural chaos will lead to death, and that means that that death in of itself is an inherent good, that loses the debate, because notice that killing or allowing mass death as a means to end suffering treats persons as instruments for allegedly desirable outcomes, and that cannot be justified for rational actors who value autonomy. So even if death ends current pain, intentionally choosing a path that causes permanent collective annihilation violates a basic obligation not to use persons as mere means, and that's why we don't allow things like humans as war shields and all those other stuff. But secondly, notice that extinction here eliminates the possibility of remedial moral action. So suffering often requires things like response and not termination of most of these agents. If the pain is the target, then the morally relevant response is alleviation on our side of the house. And the best thing to alleviate this, insofar as we don't prove any structural capacity, is to make sure that the only capacity we have now to not let the sea consume us with a lot of emotions for us to annihilate ourselves, is to keep most of these things, to keep that capacity. But notice that the value of future goods and open Eden agency. Notice that future lives and institutions are not neutral extract. They are the locus of all further value. The people of Ankobra should value the existence of a future because that future can contain goods that outweigh the present suffering that exists now within that instant. For all these reasons, that possibility of keeping these people alive and keeping the order that exists because we don't swamp them with emotions is particularly important. We take the last straw and make sure that we survive. Here.
Thank you so much for that speech. Speakers, you are reminded to check on your time as we won't be taking any notes past 7 minutes 15. With that, we'll now invite the Deputy Prime Minister here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Just 1 minute. Okay. So I don't have an independent timer. I will be depending on the timer on the chat space. So whoever is timing, please do well to indicate when, yeah, for those things. Okay, shout out. So thank you very much, GSM, for partnering me. And also shout out to all my friends down the finals with me, Ayafa, Eziel, and Collins also. Yeah, pleasure, guys. So I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, there's no way Eziel is winning over us in this debate for the following reason. He tries to defend community good and community-based identity by protecting institutions that have already failed to serve the purpose to which they were created for. We find these things problematic because he falls prey to the frame that was already established by Prime Minister to show you why these particular traditional practices that have been normalized cause intergenerational injustice as to the agency of individuals living in that particular community. It means that even if you want to respect their comparative or buy into the side where, oh, you allow this still to still be up and actually look for a better alternative to actually sustain it, even though the info slide clearly shows that it's still at the verge of destruction. It means that it's still a world where the agencies of those individuals within those communities are not protected, and those communities have the tendency of even losing the little identity and value base that they still have in that particular regard. The second thing that he tries to tell you is that, oh, irrationality that comes with the idea of explosive emotions is dangerous for the society, especially a community that is facing a fragile issue. We can also frame to you and tell you that, panel, these individuals already understand the consequences of both decisions. Harms are going to occur either ways. We can easily frame on outside of the debate that institutions that already exist in status quo that cater for emotional volatility, things like therapy and institutions that actually cater for individuals when they are angry, because those are the malicious emotions that are held by this field, can easily be provided for, especially to cater for individuals that are most likely going to fall victims when we allow for the emotions of current generations to be released. In that word, we are most likely going to curtail those rational choices more and actually provide for the of those particular individuals. The last thing he tells you is that continuity is essential, and we do not actually prioritize the interest of the actor. We're not already giving you analysis why the actors in this particular debate need to be protected, because they have not been given any other alternative to stabilize their emotional understanding and even the relatability they have with fellow individuals in that particular regard. The last thing that they try to accuse us of compelling individuals to conform to something that they are usually not used to. Within that, in that particular regard, you need to understand that the innovative nature of humanity has to conform to the emergency situation that they find themselves in. Is a realistic explanation as to why we're actually defending our side of the debate. The outside have not even given you extreme utility as to why sealing up this thing is important, because we already told you what the tendencies of the chaos still occurring much further on their side without any form of control or buffering exists, while versus our world where we actually prepare individuals to face the consequences of their emotions, we're still winning them in that particular regard. What do you get from Dominic? Dominic actually creates the framework to give you the reason why we think that this particular choice mechanism on our end is justified, as to how these individuals are being put in a vulnerable position and relying on a quasi system that is tantamount to failure. I'm going to use Eziel's own word against him in a word where he's trying to defend traditional practices and show you why there are certain instances where those leverages do not exist and continuity of itself is as it failure in a particular regard, using my extensions in a particular regard. The first thing I need to talk about in this debate, you need to understand, panel, age-long practices and traditions can only be sustained in the society where individuals who establish this are still existing, so that they can be able to control the consequences of the events that come out of the outcomes of practice. Or secondly, documentations to guide future generations on how to use it actually exist. In Ankobra, the steel masters and individuals and the scrolls are disappearing. Continuity of itself is not even visible on opposition's word. So basically, on their word, they have not given you a sustainable alternative as to how these individuals can control their emotions or even live realistically and still preserve the continuity of their communities. On our side of debate, when these particular emotions, notice panel, the current generational emotions are released, we give you an outcome where individuals are most likely going to use their internal mechanisms that originate from themselves being human beings to understand the complexities of these emotions, which has not been removed in status quo and still sustainable, unless a world where they can tell us that human beings lose that ability of rationality, because this particular technology was created, just like every other technology in status quo, was created as an escapism or a secondary like alternative to escape primary things. In a world where that primary orientation of sustaining your emotions still exists and is still very much reliable as a sustainable alternative, you cannot bind to a position side in this particular regard. They are not winning this debate. The second thing you need to understand, panel, Ankobra needs to preserve a new modernized culture for their generations to actually sustain the way they relate with their emotions. Why is this important? Dominic tells you that it causes some level of restoration of their agencies to choice. This agency actually trickles down to a lot of things like community building and development of proper culture through things like understanding a much proper culture and approaches to how individuals can actually handle things like their emotional sustainability, a much more stable growth in discussions and mental health development, and assistance to even individuals that are actually facing these issues. Because we do understand that for this technology to exist, as Eziel tells you that, these institutions, like these individuals are working as engineers, it means that the existing structures that exist to actually serve the purpose of emotional stability in that particular regard. Those existing structures thus needs to be adjusted on our side to suit the new need of the individuals in the society that cannot cater for their own emotional base when this particular seal releases the emotions of current generations. Like that, I'll take that PO and make it quick, please.
Okay, that's a very ludicrous claim. That's a very ludicrous claim. Like, it's not the same thing for holding emotions for 5 years. You're holding emotions for generations. Like, if you can't hold 5 years...
I'll continue with my argument now. Please go back and read the info slide and the motion. The next thing you need to understand is the burden placed on us and why we think that burden co-opts the mechanisms from opposition side. We are releasing the emotions of current generations. It means that other emotions from other generations are still there. It is clearly there on the choice mechanisms in the emotion. Like in the emotion, it's clearly there. I'm not making this up. Go back and read the emotions here. It means two things. It means that firstly, the emotions of other generations are still stored in the sea. Why is this primarily important? It is primarily important because the limited resources available to the people of Ankobra can be used to sustain those emotions and actually reduce the tendencies of the steel exploding much more predominantly as has been predicted to. This is essential because we systematically tell you how we still preserve human life on outside and also protecting the cultures of those indigenous people by still giving it some level of preservation by reducing the burden is currently state. The alternative on their word is that there is no preservation and the tendencies of those chaos still exploding because of there's a limitation of hope, hoping that the steel of itself will magically fix itself. It is absolutely ridiculous. On our side, the individuals that are currently existing within this get to take in their malices and we still cater for them in that particular regard. The last thing of itself, you need to understand a panel. We did that not just the fact that we develop a new culture in this particular society that allowed individuals to actually co-opt themselves in a more much better. We also tell you that most instances, emotions and malice in any community always ties to things like generational, like always ties to things like conflicting issues among community members, push away most of these emotions and lock them up somewhere. That society could not even find a solution to actually solve the things like their seal and their sea breaking. A more structural development can only come with the idea of human beings existing in society to utilize their natural agencies given to them to resolve issues around them. In a world where technology that you have created to resolve such an issue has constantly failed you, and the alternative is just to hope that it still fixes up itself and still sustains some level of solvency. That is a world where that agency should return to those individuals and they should take up the responsibility of catering for themselves and their emotional capacities. We are very proud to win this debate and this finance from OG. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Deputy Prime Minister, for that fine speech. We'll now invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
All right, thank you so much. Special shout out to Eziel for carrying me thus far. And yeah, I think that's about it. If you have a POI on mute, state your team role. And I will probably prioritize CG for short diagonal engagement. Please, if at any point I am inaudible, just type on the chat. I'm not looking at the chat phase. I'm timing myself with this device. Just tell someone to call me. Yeah. Tell the Nigerian to call me or something. All right, I begin my speech. Wait, hold on. Let me see if my partner sent anything. Okay, I'll send this. All right. I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel. A world where we have been able to successfully eliminate the most heinous of emotions, of envy, of sorrow, of pain, of all those heinous emotions, and replace them with love, with empathy, all of that beauty. We think that if we have enough time, even if it is 6 months, even if it is 7 months, even if it is 5 years, that we can use to maximize the feeling of those emotions, we think that would be the better choice to go with. That would be my extension as deputy leader of opposition, but I'm going to just reinforce a couple of things Eziel says, and I'm going to just correct a couple of misunderstandings from opening government. When you read the motion, it says that the entire sea is filled with blackness. That is the emotions of all past generations. I think what opening government failed to do, because I think the alternative is that, oh, we're only going to release the current generation's emotions. My speech is going to tackle both scenarios, because I do think when you read the info slide, the first part makes it very clear that when you open up the sea, you're releasing every single bit of emotion. But even if that is not the case, what Eziel tells you still stands. The reason why you're most likely going to create the kind of chaos that destroys and crumbles society because of the kind of emotions that will happen, the confluence of emotions, a mixture of emotions that creates confusion at that particular point in time, that creates the kind of chaos that happens. But secondly, is the fact that these people have never experienced some of these kinds of emotions ever before. They've never known what rage feels like. They've never known what anger feels like, what fear feels like, all of these kinds of things. It means they're even much more likely to go into that kind of chaos, to be irrational, to be confused about these kind of things happening to them, to act out in that particular case scenario, which means every single alternative in quotes that opening government provides, all their solutions fall and they do not work in that particular scenario. They cause the kind of chaos that Eziel tells you about, the kind of deaths that happen. I want to respond to something, and that is the idea that because of the fact that we're living a lot of time, people will probably say, oh, the dam could explode any day, so they probably live in constant fear. 3 things. I think the first response is very simple. They wouldn't live in fear because fear doesn't necessarily exist for them because it's been churned into the sea. But even if you say it probably does, I think what they would have is only an awareness of the possibility that the dam could flood out any day. What happens is not necessarily the hurt or the harm of the negative emotion, which they do not have the capacity to feel at that point in time, but just an awareness. Thirdly, and this allows me to lead into my extension that I'm going to talk about shortly, it means even worst case scenario, they're more likely going to have the time on outside of the house to prioritize the kind of positive emotions, time spent with loved ones, the kind of positive emotions that have been created in those spaces, love, all of that beauty, to be able to live the life that they have to live, even if it's limited time worst case scenario of like 10 months in that regard. A couple of things though. The first thing before I get into my extension is understanding what the priority is, because Eziel explains to you it's an action by the people, the community. And he tells you about the existential priority that comes and how you need to preserve yourself. Notice something, panel. This is a collective choice. A collective choice is only morally rational and morally justified when it amplifies or benefits the choices of the aggregate choices of which it consists, of which it constitutes. It means to the degree to which you do not necessarily better or improve or make possible for individual choices to exist because of the fact that you cause that kind of chaos and destruction and probably death on the other side of the house, you dampen the rationality, the moral rationality and moral justification for why a collective choice should exist. Collective choice exists to maximize the possibility of more choices, future choices, and even the choices of those that exist at the time to be able to enjoy the kind of experiences and love they have. It's raining in the background. I'm so sorry if you can't hear me. I'm going to try to speak louder. But I think outside is preferably better also, because if there even is a chance and a possibility of fixing the solution, finding the solution, it only exists on our side. The motion may make it seem like fiat, like CG can say, no solution exists. We can buy that. But the possibility and the hope of a possible solution is in itself valuable to these people. We think that is what gives them the incentive to possibly look for it, to possibly try to preserve the community with that understanding and that hope that it is possible. And there is a chance that we can actually pursue a possible way to fix the dam. Even if that doesn't exist, we think that possibility and that perception of that hope is in itself valuable. What is my extension? I think that life itself is like very limited. Everybody's going to die at some point in time. I think whether it's the Ankobra people or all of us here on this call. But I think what is very crucial and what makes life meaningful is the kind of positive moments that we are capable of sharing, the kind of positive emotions that we're capable of emitting, the kind of peace that we're capable of feeling, the kind of fulfillment, the kind of love, all of those beautiful things that we can share as people and as a community. We think that even if worst case scenario, the time we have to amplify those moments, the time we have to enjoy that is limited. You think it is justified because that is what amplifies your life, your existence, because you only exist once. You only exist in, like, the time you have to live is not even as long as as you probably would wish, like even without the Ankobra people, I mean in the earth today. Why is this crucial? We think it is crucial because it allows people to possibly maximize the beauty of those positive emotions, to maximize their experiences, their life. I'm sorry if anyone is trying to ask me, why I can't hear you. It's raining like hell. Right? So it allows them to maximize those experiences, maximize those positive emotions, to enjoy the life that they have now, allows the community to grow stronger, to build stronger bonds within that limited time frame that they possibly have, to be able to utilize that time to maximize those particular emotions. We think that that's very crucial. I'll take a point now. Please, CG.
Okay, so given that on your side, emotions will still be added to the river or the sea, whatever, and it's still bound to break regardless, how do you deal with it when eventually it breaks?
Yeah, I think in our worst case scenario, preceding our worst case scenario is the fact that the generations preceding that were able to maximize their life. We think that's utility that we're able to get. But on your side, what you do is you extinguish life immediately, because that there's no future choice or that possibility of existence on your side of the house. You actively, as a community, participate in your collective suicide and the collective chaos that ensues. We think our side, even worst case scenario, at least what precedes that destruction, because like they say in OG, destruction will happen either way. We think what precedes that destruction is the possibility that there could be possibly the ability to find such a solution, or the ability to find joy and fulfillment and peace and love in expressing the limited time you have to live for that particular generation. Summarily in this debate, I think it's important that you recall in your deliberation the levels of explanation that Eziel brought to you, laying out what the framework really is and why such a community should prioritize their existence, even if we have such a limited time. But additionally, I think my extension is able to ground why life in such a limited time is still worth living, why the maximization of those positive emotions and maximization of your experiences is worth it, even if worst case scenario, like CJ will want to say in the extension, it's going to lead to an ultimate doom. On both sides of the house, that would happen. On our side is only where we have the possibility and the time to enjoy and maximize the life we have to live. Very proud.
Thank you so much, Deputy Leader of Opposition, for that fine speech. To open the closing half of the debate, we'll now invite the Member of Government here.
Wait, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Awesome, thank you very much. I will take POIs in the chat. I'll also keep my camera off just to make sure that I don't disrupt anyone's network and everyone can hear me clearly. Let me start my time. Okay. I'm going to begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ankobra has never built any other physical systems to withstand and deal with the dark sides of human beings. For the last 200 years, since they started this practice, this means that for 200 years, they have never needed a police station. They've never needed a health support system, a mental health support system, for instance. They've never needed prisons, community trauma centers, conflict resolution structures, or even basic household protections like door locks, fences, etc. No one alive in Ankobra today has ever seen anger, grief, or violence in their natural form. This means when the release eventually comes, it hits a society with zero immune system for bad behavior. The real debate is that the seal will break eventually on either side of the house. If that is true, why is it better to take control of its release and ensure that you are well prepared for it when the doomsday comes? That's a simple extension from closing gap. The first thing I'm going to prove is to explain why it is a guarantee that the seal is going to break on up as well, because they cannot run away from this. One, because already the infrastructure is failing, which means that as long as it stays, it keeps becoming weaker and it keeps failing, or its ability to withhold the amount of weight, emotional weight that it has keeps decreasing. Second, the emotional weight is not stopped. it's added to it every single day, because the people of Ankobra are still alive. They are still experiencing emotions that every single day, those emotional weights are still added to the ocean. What it means is that the pressure on the failing systems increases with time, and therefore it's still guaranteed to break. Thirdly, no one can manage or stabilize the system, because the info slide tells you no engineers over there currently understand it or have been able to figure it out, which means that given these three factors, there is a definite certainty that it's going to break. The only thing they can lay claim to is we probably don't know when. Why then should we be the ones in control of breaking this system? There are two key extensions we'll run from closing gap. First is that releasing them ourselves means we choose the timing, prepare for it, and build the emotional, social, and physical infrastructure we need to minimize the harm. Opening opposition rightly preempted this. They said, well, you're going to release them without any preparation. But they never answered why we are going to do that. Because there's zero mechanization, zero rationale to believe that if you decide to unleash this kind of crisis in people, you are not going to prepare for it. When we opt to release the scene, elders now have a political obligation to take real action before the release. Why? Because imagine there's like a town hall, sitting down, a conference, everybody's sharing ideas, and we need to justify this decision, one of the two decisions on the sheet or on the info slide. This means that the only realistic way by which you can get the public buy-in to open this by your own self, even when it's not broken yet, is to be able to tell them that we are going to prepare them to be able to open for it, and they will have reasonable mitigation systems. These steps would then look like creating rapid response teams, training mediators, making sure that they understand what the system is going to look like in that changing world, setting up mental health centers, building protective systems. And given that the Ankobra people are making this decision in a state where they are in their best emotional forms, they are more likely to make the most productive and the best forms of decisions to be able to create the best forms of systems. What this means is that you are able to then create systems that drastically reduce the chaos, because the release now becomes a planned crisis. Think about it like communities that plan for flooding when they decide to open excess waters from their dams. They are able to evacuate people ahead of time, ensure that people within the flooding zones leave the direct water channels, and that becomes a planned crisis. On their side, their world is a surprise crisis, and that leads to blind explosion because people are not ready for it. On their side, it means A, it happens randomly, no one is prepared. B, there is no planning, no warning, and no structures to mitigate the circumstances. And C, there is no population, they leave a population with zero emotional abilities to maximum effect on their side. Even if, listen, hold on, even if Ops' best response is, yeah, these people will be the same people possessed, how then can they be the same policemen, healthcare centers, etc.? And Ankobra does not exist in isolation. What this means is that we are able to collaborate with other towns to bring in their professionals, because those people are not the ones that the emotions are going to be targeting. Same way we see in real life today, where if a town is facing a crisis and they can't deal with it, they get help from neighboring districts, neighboring towns, whatever. This is what planning gives you. It gives you the ability to depend on pre-existing systems that we put in place, and that means that we have far more mitigations, far more reduced impact. On their side, they get the worst version of it, and they need to defend it. Opening up.
Okay, so two things. First of all, we can also seek help to plan for when they see releases. But secondly, I think a community only plans when they have experienced that thing before. Insofar they don't have any experiential value, they cannot plan because they don't know what.
Yes, they can plan because, like I said, they can consult other communities who have experienced this every single time. There are other communities who have people who have experienced anger, they've experienced shame, depression. Those are the experts you bring in to serve as backup to help you, at least within the initial crisis days, before your instability, and then you can take over from there. I think you could have done better with your case. Let's look at the second extension. Living under a system that can collapse at any moment creates permanent anxiety, and that anxiety itself speeds up the collapse on their side. What are the mechanisms for this? A, everyday people know that the seals are failing. Everyday people know that there's no one who has the capacity to repair it. But also everyday people know that they're doing absolutely nothing to try and prevent it or hedge against it or mitigate it. What this means is that Constant anxiety exists amongst the people. Opening opposition was right. That anxiety is absorbed by the sea. But what that means is that you are pumping more pressure on the infrastructure of the sea every single day. It means that the sea gets filled, it gets weaker, it gets far faster, and the infrastructure, and you fast track the timelines of breaking an explosion, and the infrastructure breaks far quicker. On our side, the primary anxieties levels reduces because we know we are preparing, and human beings naturally have less anxiety when they feel more prepared against a crisis than when they don't have any preparation. Like we all feel when we've not had enough time to prep for a debate, but we are asked to do OG. What this means is that there is less emotional weight being added to the sea on our side every single day. That reduces the pressure. That is what buys us more time. Opening opposition tries to claim this, but it just made some voodoo analysis and said because they are able to experience happiness in the short term, they have more time. But this is what undermines their happiness argument, because if they shift the timeline to collapse faster, then their happiness is very short-lived and it's not sustainable. That's why we win this final.
Thank you so much, Member of Government, for that fine speech. Let's hear from Member of Opposition here.
Hey guys, can everyone hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Yes, you're audible. So yeah, in finals tradition, let me do a few shout outs. So first of all, shout out to Henry, the only East African speaker here. Phenomenal run. Man has carried me throughout the comp. Super excited for the madness this man is going to wreak at PAUDC. Also, shout out to my kids. They are watching. They are also on the thing. So yeah, shout out to them. Really proud of them. But more importantly, all thanks to God. I was coming from church when I started this, so yeah, it was really cool, Sha. But like, thank God. So yeah, if everyone can, I can see a hand up. Okay, the hand is down. Okay, let me just start. I will be starting in 3, 2, 1. Panel, if you've gone through your notes, and I'm sure you have, you've probably noticed something very weird and obnoxious. Both OO and CG have the exact same case, but somehow they try to make it make sense. They operate on the same premise, which is that in both their worlds, preparation is better. The premise behind preparation being better on CG's side is preparation is better because what we're able to do is pick the exact date of the occurrence. OO's premise is preparation is better because you're able to have as much time as possible. I'm going to break the deadlock by just using intuitive reasoning that already exists. The challenge that exists with this emotional gap is something that Andrews himself clearly explains. You don't have police stations, you don't have mental care health facilities. Your entire life has existed without this construction of these particular facilities. We don't think implementing these things is as simple as building buildings. It's a long-term structural change, which means that to be best prepared is not about knowing the date that it comes, it's about building as much systems and structures as possible. And that means the more time you have, the better capable you are to build those systems and structures to best deal with when the flood eventually comes. Which means that logically or intuitively, you automatically need more time. Broken that deadlock, that's probably our first extension, probably good enough to get us winning, but I want to stunt. I want this to be like a sample 90 speech sometime in the future. So now, the first thing we need to realize is that today's debate boils down to a very strong moral comparative. And the first way to understand that moral comparative is there are people now that are going to suffer harms, and there are people in the future that can't suffer harms. Who do we get to prioritize? To be honest, this is not an extinction debate. I think emotions have run high many times in humanity's history, and people have not died. It's not about extinction, but we know that emotions will really, really fox it up. Now, the first bit of context that we need to understand, and this is fairly realistic in today's debate, there is no moral value for people that do not exist. So non-existence has no moral value. This is, for example, why most communities and societies are okay with abortion, because you cannot assign a moral value to something that is not completely existent or human at that point in time. Anybody in the future, any child, any potentiate in the future does not have moral value. One, you cannot observe what their preferences and their needs and their likes are. More importantly, they just completely do not exist. So they do not have moral value apart from what is ascribed to them by society currently. What that means is that is the point in time where their moral value only exists up until the point where society itself ascribes them a moral value. Then the society that gives them that moral value, the people that give them that moral value must become, by extension, morally more important than the people that claim to want that moral value. The consequence of this is fairly intuitive and clear in today's debate, that when you are trying to make a moral prioritization, you need to prioritize people that are living now and protecting their interests, which is preventing them from this sort of harms, than those people that exist within the future. But let's actually examine and understand how this will play out when emotions run high. We think that no matter how well you prepare, even though some preparation will be very effective in mitigating it, harms would exist. The question is, where would harms exist? Notice in today's debate, there is no assumption that this debate is a classless society. So where are harms more likely to happen? Probably in a situation where people have less means and less capability to protect and defend themselves, less wealth to do things like build gated communities, less places and less ways to protect themselves in that turn. Because even if you have a heightened amount of emotions, if you have really solid doors and a well-built mansion, you have a massive place to hide. You have a lot of places to lock your doors and protect yourself, even from yourself, from others, and everything else. So it's people that are just significantly poorer that are more prone to be involved and be victims of this violence. So that means, first and foremost, you're probably harming the people that are most vulnerable within the society. But notice this, right? State is also, or the society in this instance, is culpable for their vulnerability. And I'm going to explain this in very simple terms. In a world where in a utopic world where there are no negative emotions, what people are most likely to be in the lowest class or the most vulnerable members of society? I think it's probably people that would have otherwise benefited from those negative emotions. People that get motivated by things like hatred, spite, greed, and other negative incentives, because you've now taken away the emotions that would have otherwise driven them to success and greatness, right? So at that point, you are culpable in the process that makes them poor, but at the same time, you are implementing a policy that puts them into a more vulnerable position. We think that itself is just largely problematic. But more importantly, I think the whole society as a collective is not itself culpable for the harms that exist now. One, they did not make this policy. Second of all, they did not implement this technology, right? So that means that they took no part in it, but they're just existing within the process. But if you were to claim culpability was to exist, the people that would be most culpable would be the people that have benefited from that system. Realistically, when you implement this system, what you do, or when you implement this particular solution, what you do is that you put the people that have most likely benefited from this, insulate them, create people that have been suffered and have probably suffered the most and have even been harmed by this system into vulnerable situations. And by extension, you create a significantly much more unjust and unfair society, all for prioritizing the future. And what does this future even optimistically look like? It's the people that survive, people that now have wealth to do things. Once again, the wealthy class. So that itself is just extensively problematic. But sure, I'll take you, OG.
Your word on extensive proactive individuals being preserved can only make sense if the info slide clearly explain how this is a community tradition that actually affects every single person. So there's no monopoly of control here. Every single person is going to feel the harm on either side.
Problem is, every single person is going to feel a burst in emotion. What a burst in emotion means for every single person is different. Does that make sense? So, for example, if I have a burst in emotion and I punch my door, and two of us both decide to do the exact same action of punching my door, at the point in time where I'm wealthier than you, let's assume I have 2 million and you have 20K in your account, the difference or the cost of replacing that door, both for our lifestyles, for what happens to us in future, is significantly different. So while we all experience the emotions, the outcome of those emotions, what it means for our lived experience, is significantly different. And that is the problem. People that have been intentionally made poor by a system that benefited the whole now become the worst victims of the same system that made them poor, especially because they are probably the people that are also most vulnerable to negative emotions, because they're probably people that feel it the most, get inspired by it the most, and oftentimes get motivated by it the most. The problem herein then becomes that we don't believe that we should always sacrifice the lower, most vulnerable members of our society for people that have no moral status, and even if we're to acquire moral status, we'll still be subservient or ranked below those other people. I think this is common sense morality. I think this is very clear and intuitive. Running my check. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member of Opposition, for that fine speech. To close the debate from government, we'll invite government to appear.
Can you confirm that I'm audible?
Yes, you are.
All right, amazing. Since let me just give a few shout outs before I begin. Firstly, shout out to Andrews for carrying me the entire tournament and trusting me to eye on some specific rounds and like the knowledge he has taught me Also, shout out to people who are supporting me, people like Chaguzwa, Cynthia, and Philo. Yeah, those specific people. Shout out also to the prize money. I hope we're going to win it. And lastly, just shout out to Henry. Henry, how are you doing? Now I'm going to start in the next 3 seconds. Okay, cool. 3, 2, 1, go. Panel, option 1 says, when we open the gates ourselves, according to the info slide, we only get the emotions of the current generation. Oppositions vote when they open their self, like when they let the gate in itself open by itself, you get the entire emotions of like what literally existed from all the individuals who lived within the society. And I'm going to show to you how Andrew's speech shows you how option 1 in itself proves capacity and how we are more likely going to ensure we gain better incentives into like dealing with this problem. What do we get from CO? Because they are the easiest team to take out. CO talks about this entire idea that there's a long-term structural change that is needed based on more time that you create, and you want to ensure that like you can prepare for this problem, right? There are 3 things here. Understand, number 1, at a point in time when you're going to carry the fear, the grief, etc. of a lot of individuals that existed back then, because you don't know how to literally ensure that you have expressed this emotion before, that means that it's most likely going to be like absorbed by the sea. That means within the long run, the time that they want to try to create is one that is most likely going to be limited. You don't have this in their world. But the second thing is, understand, this society does not exist in isolation. That's why when it comes to problems, we seek individuals who have experienced anxiety, who have experienced fear, who have experienced grief, and we try to collaborate with them to understand exactly how can we deal with these problems through things such as like research, like understanding, meetings, etc. Why is this very important? Because on our side of the house, we don't give fate the power to ensure that it can judge exactly how we're going to live within this community. We give control to ourselves, and we don't think that is most likely going to be gained from closing Ocean's World. The second thing that they talk about is this entire idea of moral value. We think it's very difficult to measure how morality in itself can be evaluated at a point in time when that system doesn't have any form of negative implications that you're more likely going to create. Why then do we think our world is better in this? It means that we say at a point in time when you understand that you have given the entire autonomy of how those systems is literally circulated around, that means that you then create that form of like solution based on your own point of view. That means at a point in time when you do decide to release that form of C, at a point in time when you now can literally express those, like you can literally suppress those emotions, and you literally have specific mechanisms in terms of how you can tackle those things, because it's based specifically on how you're literally ensuring that you're only handling the type of capacity of the emotions that currently exist within the society currently, because you've chosen it to ensure that you literally eliminate that forms of realities based on your own form of choice. We think we then ensure that that moral value is most likely being gained on our side of the house. What then does OO say? OO says that we want to preserve agents. The first thing here, we think agency is more on our side. Why? Because at a point in time, they lack the form of control over the release. That means that the form of identity that Ezi wants to protect is most likely going to be lost here. Why? Because the society that you currently say that was so perfect and you find meaningful and helpful ideologies to literally interrogate within it, right? You are now waiting for a specific time at a point in time that you're literally just going to be flooded the entire generation of emotions. One, you're doing nothing about it. Two, you don't have any form of mechanisms of how you're most likely going to eliminate that problem. But three, you don't know how to you can't express these emotions. These emotions are expressed within the entire ideology of the
POI.
C. That means the speaker itself talks about these emotions and speaks about these emotions. That means that the deadlock of literally you being vested with the entire emotions then increases on their side. You lose that form of agency, because when you don't have control over the entire, you don't have control over the fate of what is going to exist within you, you don't gain that capacity. We don't think we can buy more into that. But the second thing we get from them is this. The second thing we get from OO is that why we should preserve status quo and to the last straw so that we can just survive. And we get a spirit, an extension that comes from DOO when he talks about the positiveness and fulfillment that exists within a society. I've already shown to you how you're going to lack that form of actualization. Why? Because now you exist in a systematic society that once was so perfect in terms of how
problems were eliminated within the first place. Now, those specific problems, you don't have any knowledge or any form of research on how you're most likely going to tackle it. But the second thing is, we don't think even in Oxford, if they are going to look for ways into preserving this, they're more likely going to find a society where like that has preserved generations of emotions and griefs and literally ensure that it can be functional. That means that their society is most likely not going to be functional on that comparative analogy. Because what we do, because this is based specifically on how like the current generation, right? That means that when we seek this specific mechanism, tactics to ensure that we eliminate that problem, we are speaking from societies that can literally handle current generation per generation etc. It's different from their side of the house. You can't gain that form of functionality. But secondly, you then lose that sense of like that form of that form of meaning and fulfillment in the long run. Why is this the case? I got you, I'll check you. Why is this the case? The idea now is like, it's very simple. Because like at a point in time, when there's no form of like active, like when there's form of like active awareness, because individuals' thoughts are literally unraveled on that entire single point of how those negative emotions are literally drawing to the ocean. That means that you don't have that entire idea of like, even if like you're continuously enjoying etc, but like the risk in itself then becomes uncertain, because like one, the form of survival that the principle that they want to talk about is literally far-fetched, because at a point in time when it breaks in terms of like preparation, you are not prepared. Secondly, the form of like control, you lack it etc. We don't think we can buy into such a world. What then is and with extension, and why does it clearly distinct over opening government? It's very simple. Our case proves that keeping the gate shut guarantees a catastrophic collapse, because the seals are already failing, no one can repair them, and every day of fear adds more negative emotion into the ocean, accelerating that form of breakdown. But secondly, releasing on our own timeline is the only way to take control of the timing, prepare communities, build protective system, and manage return in controlled, planned way. So that means that their word gives us an unpredictable, like, from Ops point of view, their word gives us an unpredictable explosion with centuries of disordered emotions and zero preparation at all. And second, even if we do want to gain this form of preparation, we can't find a society that has literally managed to sustain current like generations of like anxiety, generations of grief at the same time at a single point. We think our word gives us controlled releases, reduced anxiety, and the chance to build the support structure needed to keep the people safe. We don't think faith in itself ought to control how we ought to live our lives and destinies. We live in the 21st century, and we think this is based specifically on how now we ought to tell fate what we want to do. From our side of the hood, we say we want to protect these individuals. They don't do that. We say we want these individuals to be safe and like literally control their form of destinies. They don't do that from CO. They don't do that from opening operation. We build that on what opening government says. We are proud to win.
Thank you so much, Government Whip, for that fine speech. To close the debate and to close the tournament, we'll now invite Chief Whip. Here.
Hi, I'm in Uganda. We have no power right now. I'm going to debate in the dark, but yeah, I want to confirm if I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
I want to confirm if I am audible.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Since it's the culture of finals, I just want to do a few shout outs. Shout outs to the Aladdin brothers. They know themselves. They're a massive support system. Shout out to the Fosters. Shout out to Wesi. Shout out to Adika. Shout out to Denise. Yeah, I don't think life would have been meaningful this year without you guys. And my partner, most importantly, Ayafa, for just making this work for me. He has at least tried to prove to me that I am not as shitty as everybody says I am.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I just need a timer. Phone. Hold on. If you have POIs, I'm going to ask for them. I'm going to start on my next word panel. Sorry for the delays. Yeah. So let's start with closing government, because beating them is a logic game. The idea is basically very simple. These guys are delusional. They say that the water is going to break at any impending moment. It's going to hold anytime soon, and they should open the waters as soon as possible. There are some cases now saying that they should wait 30, 40 years to build systems, to build police, to train doctors, to train mental health experts, to make sure that people know how to hold their emotions. By the time you even do that, the authors would have already released you. It means all the impacts you're trying to mitigate is not going to work for them. I think that means in of themselves that the impact in of itself is out. That case shafts itself, it's very contradictory, but it also knifes itself. If you don't buy this, here's another metric. When you are adjudicating, you need to understand something very simple in this specific debate. Because if you're buying their analysis, it means then that that we are going to have longer time. That means that because the idea is on urgency, right? They're having that means that they're going to take shorter time to do things than we are. On a comparative, we take more time to build systems, we take more time to sensitize. I'm going to co-opt Andrew's mechanism, right? Because you can also consult from other communities. You can even go to the US about mental health systems. You can go about other individuals and the like. I think we still co-opt the benefit. If I told you buy their benefit, we have more time to do it at the end of the day. We're far better than closing government. I don't think that can be the plausible expression in the round. But also, I think Raymond's framing is very important to the idea of emotions of only the current generation. Ayafa tells you a very brilliant expression as to why the people you're fighting for in the near future have no fucking moral value. But even if you don't buy this, they have no moral value because, number one, the people who you are fighting for, first of all, you may not know what they specifically want. You may want to probably open the floodgates now, but then doom the whole generation to castigating you for generations for thinking that they want to have these emotions when they never wanted them to, when they never wanted to have them in the first place. I don't think that's going to be the plausible case in the chat. The people who you have an obligation to now are the people who have kept you the leader, are the people who have kept you the chief. They've never come to now vote you out of power. They've never come to attack you because they surprise you. They have a special vulnerability they've placed onto you to protect their interests, to protect their life, to ensure that you protect their emotions so that the whole world never goes in limbo. Because that means every obligation you have is a prayer to those individuals. Your obligation to those individuals is the most important thing before you have obligations to any other individual. Closing government's case is not logically a prayer, but in our case is principally a prayer because the people we have to prioritize are ours. In a particular regard, I want to engage opening government because I don't think their case is also going to win them the chat. They have two arguments, but before that, I'll take them. Opening government is quiet. They have nothing. You had your time, you wasted it. Let's first start with the first argument they had. The first argument they had is on the idea of intergenerational justice, i.e., the idea of that we need to do it because we have an obligation at the end of the day because we need to liberate people from this dogma in of itself. I think I'd rather remain in dogma, not knowing that I am angry or peaceful or anxiety. I'd rather live in a world where I don't have those things than when I am dead. Then I'm flooded with these emotions where someone is going to come and purge me and kill me. I've already explained why those things are important. Your existence as an individual comes a prior to any other existence of protecting any other interest that particular regard. I don't think that's going to work. Survival has to be the most thing you have to vote for in this particular regard. But also, this principle is contingent. It's not non-contingent. They can't just win like that. They have to give you pragmatic benefits of the tangible stuff that they have. What is on table that is tangible, that ensure that individuals are going to become happier, are going to live better. I think opening government is worse than CG because they don't give you any tangible benefits at how the world ultimately becomes better. Secondly, talk about the idea of sustainability that we need probably more resources. We have the resources to maintain it. But I think the idea is that I think you're going to use more money when you have to stop these people from killing each other. They're very angry. They're very anxiety. They're very depressed. They're going to do the most shitty things. I want to understand, and this is the argument, scalable benefit. If I'm angry for 5 days, I can slap my girlfriend. So I've been angry with her for generations. I've been angry for all this. You had your chance, man. You spoiled it. Leave me alone. The idea is basically very simple, right? The idea of, like you've been angry for 10 more years. It means the person is more likely going to do even far more perverse harm, more adverse harm in a particular regard. It means you're going to spend more resources to stopping people from killing each other, from raping each other. It means you spend more resources on their side than on our side when you have a gradual more time to build resources and train those individuals. I think our comparative is far better. We build those individuals. I don't think also the next generation is probably going to be there. I think the idea is symmetrical in that particular regard. I think the aspect is also very weird, right? Because if you want to kill, I already explained the idea of choosing of itself, already explained what is far more perverse on their side of the debate. Let's explain, before I explain to you why we beat our opening and go further into why Ayafa's exception is the most brilliant thing in this debate, I'll take a POI from DSM.
Hi, he's not here, so please take me. So we agree with your partner when he says that it is only the current generation that should be catered for. Justify why your comparative places them at risk of facing the consequences of emotions from more generations that they did not contribute.
Yeah, but the thing is that they're going to be dead by that time. The people who are going to be alive are the people who are going to be the next generation, who already said don't have moral value, but also we don't care about. Remember, you're selling this thing to hold on to at least a longer period of time. By the time they are dead, at least the people who are alive now don't need to die when someone stabs them in the back or shoots them in the head. Fine, let's delay this for 20 more years. At least you owe an obligation of 20 more years to the people that exist now. You haven't responded to that principle. That case cannot still fly. Why do we think we beat opening opposition? Opening opposition's case is very beautiful. I want to be able to explain to you. But there are two things I want to give to you in this specific debate. They said that future is good. They never explain why the future is good. This is the debate about why it is good for the actor. It's not just about why saying things are good. Why things are good for the actor. So even if you say life is good for people to explain like life, have good experiences, you need to understand what those experiences are. Why at least is living those experiences in a bit of valuable or able to be attained. There is no tangible benefit. It's just principle. No pragmatics to explain why that's something that we should vote for in this particular regard. We beat them. But also they just explain the idea of why life is limited. I have to understand very simple. I have to express to you how we attain that specific value and why explaining that value is important. If you're going to buy opening operations case, you never get why it's important. We give you why it's important. Our case is biologically apparent to theirs. I was the most brilliant person in this debate. Number one, on framing, he's about to explain to you why those things, so why the society looks like and why probably those individuals don't have a level of moral value. He's just explaining to you why there's going to be a far more individuals than accepted. On opening on gov benches as a whole, you're able to show you why the poorest individuals who are now on their wall are still going to now become more angry and going to kill each other. Rich people have mansions. Like, look at the patch. The patch is the very biggest example. The rich people were never killed. They were in mansions. They were still that way. But the broke people were killing themselves because there was no way to protect themselves. On their side, the most vulnerable individuals you want to defend are far killed more, but also are killed by themselves. It's the most petty and evil thing you can do to get two people in a room and make them kill each other when they're vulnerable. It's like getting two lame people to probably kill each other because you feel it's very beneficial. On the outside, that is principally very evil and petty. You can't vote for them. But also tell you why the worst people, the most harmful people will survive, creating a constant cycle of more suffering, creating a constant cycle of more suffering because they have more artillery and they're now more petty, more angry, more anxious, more insecure. So they're most likely going to be the more dangerous people. On their world, you protect the most dangerous individuals and you let them live. On our side, we at least allow our community to understand how to live together, to live in harmony and create more sustainability. The greatest thing for that community of the actor, you're proud to win from closing opposition.
Thank you, Chief Whip, for that wonderful speech, and thank you everyone for a really amazing round of debate. Congratulations for making this far. Can all the panelists join me in deliberation room 1 on Discord so that we can deliberate?
Okay, everyone else, you just know that we're gonna be starting the award ceremony around the top of the hour. So we'll come back around 5 p.m. GMT. That'll be great. Yep, so that's it. Members of the panel, you can move to Discord room 1, I guess.